The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust as it rolled into Douglas, Wyoming on a scorching August afternoon in 1879, carrying a woman whose desperate eyes scanned the unfamiliar town like she was searching for salvation she knew she would not find. Tabitha Carson stepped down from the coach with one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching a worn carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world, which was not much at all. The fabric of her faded blue dress stretched tight across her pregnant stomach, and she could feel the curious stares of the townspeople burning into her like brands on cattle. She was 6 months along, unmarried, and completely alone in a place where those 3 facts could destroy a woman faster than a prairie fire in drought season. The man who had promised to marry her back in Kansas City had disappeared the moment she told him about the baby, taking with him her life savings and any foolish notions she had harbored about true love. Her family had turned their backs on her, her father calling her a disgrace before slamming the door in her face. She had chosen Douglas because it was far enough away that no one would know her shame, and because the advertisement in the newspaper had mentioned that the town needed a schoolteacher. Tabitha had education, even if she no longer had respectability. She could read and write better than most men, could do sums in her head, and knew enough history and geography to teach children their lessons. Whether anyone would hire a pregnant, unmarried woman was another question entirely. The August heat pressed down on her shoulders like a physical weight as she walked toward what appeared to be the main street of Douglas. The town was bigger than she had expected, with wooden buildings lining both sides of a wide dirt road. She could see a general store, a saloon, a hotel, and what looked like a church at the far end of the street. Cowboys sat on the porch of the saloon, their conversation stopping as she passed. She kept her eyes forward and her chin up, though inside she felt like crumbling into dust. Vincent Dalton was leading his horse toward the livery stable when he first saw her. He had just returned from 3 weeks on the range, checking on his cattle and mending fences, and he was covered in trail dust and badly in need of a hot bath. But something about the woman walking down the street made him stop and stare. It was not just that she was pretty, though she was, with dark hair pinned up under a bonnet and features that spoke of determination as much as desperation. It was the way she carried herself, like someone who had been knocked down but refused to stay down. And it was the obvious swell of her belly and the fact that she wore no wedding ring. Vincent was 30 years old, owner of a modest ranch outside of town that he had built up from nothing over the past 8 years. He had come to Wyoming from Missouri after the war, looking for a fresh start in a place where no one knew his past or cared about which side he had fought on. He had never married, though it was not for lack of opportunities. The truth was that he had seen too much death and suffering during the war, and he had convinced himself that he was too damaged for the kind of gentle life that came with a wife and family. But something about this woman pulled at him in a way he could not explain. He watched as she stopped in front of the hotel, hesitating before walking inside. Vincent tied his horse to the hitching post and found himself following her, though he could not have said why. Through the window, he could see her talking to the hotel clerk, a pinch-faced man named Morris, who had a reputation for being hard on anyone he considered morally questionable. Vincent could not hear the conversation, but he could see the way Morris was looking at her, the way he shook his head and pointed toward the door. Vincent pushed through the hotel entrance just as Tabitha was turning to leave, her face pale but composed. Morris looked up at him with that superior expression he wore when he thought he was enforcing some kind of moral standard. Before he could think better of it, Vincent spoke up. "Is there a problem here?" Morris sniffed. "No problem at all, Mr. Dalton." I was just explaining to this woman that we do not have any rooms available. Vincent knew for a fact that the hotel had at least 4 empty rooms. He had passed by earlier and seen the vacancy sign in the window. He looked at Tabitha, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she was struggling to maintain her dignity in the face of rejection. "That is strange, Morris," Vincent said, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. "I could have sworn I saw your vacancy sign not an hour ago." Morris flushed red. "Well, those rooms are reserved. For who? That is none of your concern." Vincent stepped closer to the desk, and Morris actually took a step back. Vincent was not a violent man by nature, but he was tall and broad-shouldered from years of hard work, and when he wanted to be intimidating, he could be. "I am making it my concern," Vincent said quietly. "Now, are you going to rent this lady a room, or am I going to have to tell everyone in town how you turned away a paying customer?" Morris looked between Vincent and Tabitha, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed and pulled out the registry book. "Fine. That will be $3 for the week, in advance." Tabitha fumbled with her bag, pulling out a small purse. Vincent could see that her hands were shaking now, the composure finally cracking. She counted out the coins slowly, and Vincent realized with a sinking feeling that she was probably giving Morris nearly everything she had. When she pushed the money across the counter, Morris snatched it up and slapped a key down in its place. "Room 4. Top of the stairs, second door on the left." Tabitha took the key without a word and picked up her bag. Vincent reached for it at the same time, and their hands brushed. She pulled back as if burned, looking up at him with wide eyes that were gray like storm clouds. "I can manage," she said, and her voice was softer than he had expected, with a slight tremor that matched her hands. "I am sure you can," Vincent said gently, "but you do not have to." For a moment, she just stared at him, and he could see her trying to figure out what he wanted from her. He understood that look. A woman alone, especially one in her condition, learned quickly that men rarely helped without expecting something in return. "I do not need charity," she said, lifting her chin. "And I certainly do not need anything else you might be offering." Vincent felt his face flush, understanding her meaning immediately. "Madam, I apologize if I gave you the wrong impression. I was just trying to help. No strings attached." She studied him for another long moment, then seemed to come to some decision. She let him take her bag, though she kept a careful distance between them as they climbed the stairs. The room was small and sparse, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair by the window. Vincent set her bag down on the bed and turned to leave. "Thank you," she said quietly, and when he looked back, he saw that her eyes had filled with tears, though she was clearly fighting to keep them from falling. "For what you did downstairs, I appreciate it." "You are welcome, miss." He paused, realizing he did not know her name. "Carson." "Tabitha Carson. Vincent Dalton." He tipped his hat. "Welcome to Douglas, Miss Carson." She did not correct him on the miss, and he noticed. He also noticed the way her hand drifted protectively to her belly and the absence of any mention of a husband. Vincent was not a stupid man. He could put the pieces together. But whatever her story was, it was hers to tell or not tell as she chose. "If you need anything," he said, pausing at the door, "my ranch is about 5 miles north of town. Anyone can point you in the right direction. Or you can usually find me at the general store on Saturdays." "Why would you offer that?" she asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "You do not know me." Vincent thought about that for a moment. "I guess because everyone needs help sometimes. And it seems to me like you could use a friend." He left before she could respond, but her face stayed with him as he went back down the stairs and out into the afternoon heat. There was something about Tabitha Carson that had gotten under his skin in the span of 10 minutes, and he suspected that was going to be a problem. But for the first time in a long time, it was a problem he found himself wanting to have. Tabitha sat down on the bed as soon as the door closed, letting the tears finally fall. She cried silently, pressing her hands over her mouth to muffle any sound. She had learned to cry quietly back in Kansas City, in the boarding house where she had stayed after her family disowned her, where any sign of weakness could be used against you. The kindness that stranger had shown her had broken something loose inside her, some dam she had built to hold back all the fear and grief and shame. When the tears finally stopped, she washed her face in the basin and looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. She looked tired and older than her 22 years. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins during the journey, and her dress was wrinkled and dusty. But her eyes were clear, and her jaw was set with determination. She had not come all this way to fall apart now. She spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking her few belongings and then walked through town, getting a sense of the place that would be her home, at least for now. Douglas was a working town, full of ranchers and railroad workers and the people who served them. The streets were busy with wagons and horses, and the sound of hammering came from somewhere nearby where someone was building something new. It was a town on the rise, full of opportunity for those who could grab it. Tabitha found the schoolhouse at the edge of town, a small wooden building that looked like it could use a coat of paint. Through the windows, she could see rows of empty desks and a blackboard that needed cleaning. Her heart ached with wanting. Teaching had been her dream since she was a girl, and she had worked hard to get the education necessary to do it. But she knew that no school board would hire her now, not in her condition. Still, she could not stop herself from trying. The next morning, she put on her best dress, which was not much better than the others but at least was not travel-stained, and made her way to the small office behind the general store, where the mayor apparently conducted town business. She had learned this from the woman who worked at the hotel, a kind soul named Martha who had brought her fresh water and towels the night before, and had not looked at her with judgment. The mayor was a round man with mutton-chop whiskers and a vest that strained across his belly. His name was Harold Pemberton, and he looked up from his desk with surprise when Tabitha walked in. "Can I help you, miss? I am here about the teaching position," Tabitha said, keeping her voice steady. "I saw the advertisement in the Kansas City paper." Pemberton's eyes dropped to her belly, and his expression closed off immediately. "I see. Well, I am afraid that position has been filled. The advertisement was only 2 weeks old when I saw it." "Things move quickly out here," Pemberton said, already looking back down at the papers on his desk, dismissing her. Tabitha felt anger flare in her chest, hot and bright. "I have excellent references. I can read Latin and French. I can teach mathematics through algebra. I have experience with children of all ages." "I am sure you do," Pemberton said, not looking up. "But as I said, the position is filled." "By who?" Now he did look up, and his expression was cold. "That is none of your concern, Miss Carson. Now if you will excuse me, I have work to do." Tabitha wanted to argue, wanted to demand that he give her a fair chance, but she could see it would be pointless. She turned and walked out, her head high even as her heart sank. She had known it would be difficult, but the reality of it was crushing. Without the teaching position, she had no way to support herself and the baby. She was so lost in her own thoughts that she almost walked right into Vincent Dalton as he was coming out of the general store, his arms full of supplies. He caught her elbow to steady her, and then quickly released it when he saw who it was. "Miss Carson, are you all right?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. But Vincent was watching her with those keen blue eyes, and she had the feeling he could see right through her. "You tried for the teaching job," he said, "and it was not a question." "How did you know?" Pemberton is predictable and small-minded. Vincent shifted the supplies in his arms. "I am sorry, you would have been good at it." "You do not know that." "I know that anyone willing to travel across half the country to take a job in a place like Douglas has the kind of grit it takes to handle a classroom full of wild children." He paused, then seemed to come to a decision. "Look, I know this is forward and you can say no, but I could use some help at my ranch." Tabitha felt her defenses go up immediately. "What kind of help?" Vincent must have heard the suspicion in her voice because he held up one hand. "Nothing improper, I promise. I need someone who can keep books, write letters, that sort of thing. I have been doing it myself, but I am not good at it and it takes time away from the actual ranch work. It would be a few hours a day and I would pay fair wages." "Why me?" "Because you obviously know how to read and write, and because you need work." He looked at her steadily. "And because I think you would do a good job." Tabitha wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him that she did not need his pity or his charity. But the truth was that she desperately needed income, and the money she had left would not last more than a few weeks. Pride was a luxury she could not afford. What would the wages be? Vincent named a sum that was more than fair, more than she had expected. "Plus meals while you are working." "My cook always makes too much anyway." "You have a cook." "I have an old cowhand who cannot ride anymore because of his back, and who makes biscuits that could break teeth, but he is company," Vincent said with a slight smile. "His name is Pete, and he will probably talk your ear off, but he is harmless." Tabitha found herself smiling despite herself. "When would you want me to start?" "Tomorrow. I could pick you up in town around 8 in the morning, bring you out to the ranch, and have you back by evening." It was more kindness than she had been shown in months, and part of her was still suspicious of it. But she was also desperate, and Vincent Dalton had not given her any reason to distrust him. If anything, he had gone out of his way to help her without asking for anything in return. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow at 8. Vincent's smile widened, and she noticed for the first time that he had a kind face, weathered by sun and wind but with laugh lines around his eyes. "I will meet you at the hotel." She watched him walk away with his armload of supplies, and for the first time since arriving in Douglas, she felt something that might have been hope. True to his word, Vincent was waiting outside the hotel at 8 the next morning with a wagon and a gentle mare hitched to it. He helped Tabitha up onto the seat, careful not to touch her more than necessary, and then climbed up beside her. The ride out to his ranch took about half an hour, following a rutted road through rolling grassland dotted with cattle. The ranch itself was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy house, a barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and several corrals. Vincent helped her down from the wagon and led her to the house, where she met Pete, a grizzled man in his 60s with a limp and a warm smile. "So you are the lady Vincent told me about," Pete said, shaking her hand with surprising gentleness. "It will be nice to have someone civilized around here for a change." The house was cleaner than Tabitha had expected, though clearly the work of men who did their best but lacked a woman's touch. Vincent led her to a small room that served as his office, where papers were stacked haphazardly on a desk, and account books lay open with entries in uneven handwriting. "I know it is a mess," Vincent said, looking embarrassed. "I try to keep up with it, but ranching takes most of my time." Tabitha sat down at the desk and began sorting through the papers. There were bills of sale for cattle, receipts for supplies, letters from buyers in Cheyenne and Denver. It was chaotic, but not beyond saving. She found herself getting absorbed in the work, organizing the papers into categories, making notes on what needed to be paid and what payments were owed to Vincent. Vincent left her to it, going out to work with his hands, and Pete brought her coffee mid-morning and then lunch at noon. The old cowhand did indeed talk her ear off, telling her stories about his days on the trail and asking her friendly questions that never quite crossed the line into being intrusive. He did not ask about the baby or the absence of a husband, and she was grateful for that. By the time Vincent came back in the late afternoon, dusty and smelling of horses and leather, Tabitha had made significant progress. She had organized all the papers, balanced the account books, and written up a summary of what was owed and what was due. Vincent stood looking at the neat stacks on his desk with something like wonder. "You did all this in one day." "It was not as bad as it looked," Tabitha said, though that was not entirely true. "You just needed a system." "I need you to come back tomorrow," Vincent said, "and the day after that. However long you are willing to work." They fell into a routine over the next few weeks. Vincent would pick her up each morning and bring her to the ranch, where she would work on the books and correspondence while he went about the business of running the ranch. Pete would make her lunch and keep her company, and sometimes Vincent would join them, and they would eat together at the kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. Tabitha found herself looking forward to those meals, to the easy conversation and the way Vincent listened when she talked, really listened, like what she had to say mattered. He told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and maybe get some horses to break and sell. She told him about growing up in Kansas City, about her love of books and learning, carefully editing out the parts of her story that were too painful to share. He never asked about the baby's father, though she sometimes caught him looking at her with a question in his eyes that he was too polite to voice. And she never volunteered the information, because it still hurt too much to talk about the man who had betrayed her, who had taken her innocence and her trust and her money, and left her with nothing but shame and a child on the way. But as the weeks passed and her belly grew rounder, she found herself wanting to tell Vincent the truth. He had been nothing but kind to her, nothing but respectful, and she felt like she owed him honesty. One afternoon in late September, when the leaves on the cottonwood trees were starting to turn gold and the air had a crisp edge to it, she finally worked up the courage. They were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, taking a break from work. Pete had gone into town for supplies, and the ranch hands were out checking on the cattle in the north pasture. It was just the two of them, and the afternoon sun was warm on their faces. "Vincent," she said, and something in her tone made him look at her with immediate attention. "I need to tell you something, about the baby. You do not owe me any explanations, Tabitha." She had noticed that he had started using her first name a few weeks ago, and she had not corrected him, just like she had started thinking of him as Vincent instead of Mr. Dalton. "I know I do not owe you anything," she said, "but I want to tell you. You have been so kind to me, and I feel like you deserve to know the truth." So she told him everything, about the man in Kansas City who had courted her with pretty words and promises of marriage, about how she had believed him when he said they would have a future together, and how she had trusted him enough to give him everything, about waking up one morning to find him gone, along with the money she had been saving for their life together, about telling her parents and being thrown out of her own home, her father calling her names that still made her flinch when she remembered them. Vincent listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to sink toward the mountains. "What was his name?" he finally asked, and his voice was cold in a way she had never heard before. "Why?" "Because I want to know what to call him when I find him." Despite everything, Tabitha felt a flutter of warmth in her chest. "You are not going to find him. He is long gone, probably off conning some other foolish girl." "You were not foolish," Vincent said fiercely, turning to look at her. "You trusted someone you thought loved you. That is not foolish. That is human. He is the one who should be ashamed, not you." Tabitha felt tears prick her eyes. No one had said anything like that to her since this whole nightmare had started. Everyone else had looked at her with judgment or pity or disgust, but Vincent looked at her like she was the wronged party, like she was worth defending. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For not judging me. For treating me like I am more than just my mistakes." Vincent reached out and took her hand, and the touch sent electricity through her. "We have all made mistakes, Tabitha. God knows I have made plenty. But that baby you are carrying is not a mistake. That baby is a gift, no matter how it came to be." He paused, and she could see him gathering his courage for something. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, but she could hear the emotion underneath it. "I have been thinking about something for a while now. And maybe this is not the right time to say it, but I have never been good at keeping quiet when something is important." He turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "Tabitha, I know we have not known each other long, just over a month, but in that time you have become important to me. More than important. I think about you all the time. I look forward to seeing you every morning, and when I think about the future, I cannot imagine it without you in it." Tabitha's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Vincent, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I care about you, and I care about that baby you are carrying. And I know that baby has a father out there somewhere, a father who does not deserve the title. But that baby could have a father who chooses it, who wants it, who will love it and raise it and be there for every moment." He took a breath. "Marry me, Tabitha. Let me be a father to your child. Let me be a husband to you." Tabitha pulled her hand away, standing up so quickly she felt dizzy. "You do not know what you are saying. You do not have to do this. I am not your responsibility." "I am not asking because I think you are my responsibility," Vincent said, standing as well. "I am asking because I am falling in love with you and I want to spend my life with you. You cannot love me. You barely know me. I know that you are strong and smart and brave. I know that you work harder than most men I have met. I know that you laugh at Pete's terrible jokes to make him feel good, and that you always make sure the ranch cats get fed when you think no one is looking. I know that you read poetry when you think you are alone, and that you cry sometimes late at night in that hotel room when you think no one can hear." He took a step closer to her. "I know that you deserve better than what life has given you, and I want to be the one to give it to you." "This is insane," Tabitha said, but her voice was shaking. "You do not marry someone out of pity. Is that what you think this is? Pity?" Vincent looked almost angry now. "Tabitha, I have been alone for 8 years. 8 years of telling myself I was better off that way, that I did not need anyone. And then you walked into that hotel and you looked at me with those storm cloud eyes, and something inside me just knew. I knew that I could spend the rest of my life looking and never find anyone who made me feel the way you do." "How do I make you feel?" Tabitha whispered. "Like I am home," Vincent said simply. "Like all the broken pieces of me might have a chance to heal. Like the future might be something worth looking forward to instead of just something to endure." Tabitha felt the tears spilling down her cheeks now, and she did not try to stop them. "I am scared, Vincent. I am so scared. What if this does not work? What if you wake up one day and regret it?" "I will not. You cannot know that, you are right. I cannot know the future, but I know my own heart and I know that I want this. I want you, and I want that baby if you will have me." He was not touching her, was not pushing her, was just standing there looking at her with his heart in his eyes, waiting for her answer. And Tabitha realized that she wanted this too. She wanted it so much it terrified her. She wanted the safety of his ranch, the warmth of his smile, the strength of his presence. She wanted to stop being alone. She wanted to believe that someone could love her despite everything. "That baby will know a father's love," Vincent said quietly. "I promise you that. Whether you marry me or not, if you want me to be a part of that child's life, I will be. But I want to be a part of your life too. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to build a life with you. What do you say?" Tabitha took a shaky breath and then another, and then she stepped forward and put her hand in his. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Vincent's face broke into a smile that transformed him, making him look younger and lighter and full of joy. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and held her like she was something precious. Tabitha buried her face in his chest and let herself cry, but these were different tears. These were tears of relief and hope and the beginning of something that might, against all odds, be happiness. They were married a week later in the small church at the end of Douglas's Main Street, with Pete and Martha from the hotel as witnesses. Tabitha wore a simple cream-colored dress that Martha had helped her make, with enough room for her growing belly. Vincent wore his best suit, which was a bit worn at the elbows but clean and pressed. The preacher, a kind man named Reverend Walsh, performed the ceremony without any of the judgment Tabitha had feared, treating them like any other couple embarking on marriage. When Vincent slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, Tabitha felt something settle inside her. This was real. This was happening. She was becoming Tabitha Dalton, and she was going to have a home and a husband and a chance at the life she had thought was lost forever. The reception was small, held at the ranch with Pete cooking up a feast that was surprisingly edible. A few of Vincent's neighboring ranchers came by with their families, and if they were surprised by Tabitha's obvious pregnancy, they were polite enough not to comment on it. Tabitha found herself laughing and talking with the other women, feeling like she might actually belong here. As the sun set and the guests departed, Vincent led her into the house, to the bedroom they would now share. Tabitha felt a flutter of nerves. They had agreed to take things slowly, to give her time to adjust to this new life and to let their relationship develop naturally. But she was still nervous, still scared of being vulnerable again. Vincent must have sensed it because he simply took her hand and led her to sit on the edge of the bed. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said gently. "I meant what I said about taking care of you and the baby. That does not come with conditions." "I know," Tabitha said, and she did know. She trusted Vincent in a way she had not trusted anyone in a long time. "I am just scared. Of me. Of how much I already care about you," she admitted. "The last time I let myself care about someone, it destroyed me. And I cannot go through that again." Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs wiping away her tears. "I am not him, Tabitha. I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me now, for better or worse." She laughed through her tears. "Those were in the vows, were they not?" "They were, and I meant every word." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the kisses she had shared with the man who had ruined her. Those had been demanding, taking. This was giving, offering. This was a question instead of a demand. Tabitha kissed him back, letting herself feel the warmth of it, the rightness of it. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "Yeah." Vincent's voice was rough with emotion. "Yeah." They lay down together that night, fully clothed, with Vincent's arm around her and her head on his chest. Tabitha listened to the steady beat of his heart and felt the baby kick against her ribs, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. She felt like she had finally come home. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness that Tabitha had not known was possible. She moved into the ranch house fully, making it into a real home. She sewed curtains for the windows and planted herbs in the kitchen garden. She organized Vincent's chaotic office into something functional and started helping him plan for the ranch's expansion. She grew rounder with each passing week, and Vincent treated her pregnancy like it was the most precious thing in the world. He talked to her belly at night, telling the baby stories about the ranch and the horses and the wide Wyoming sky. He built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. He rode into town and came back with baby clothes and blankets, looking both proud and embarrassed. He attended to her every need without making her feel helpless, always asking what she wanted instead of assuming. And somewhere in all of that, Tabitha fell completely and utterly in love with her husband. It was not the wild, reckless love she had felt before. This was deeper, steadier, like bedrock instead of quicksand. This was the kind of love that could weather storms and survive hardships. This was the kind of love that built futures. Winter came to Wyoming with a vengeance, bringing snow that piled high against the sides of the house and winds that howled through the night. Tabitha was huge now, her belly so swollen she could barely see her own feet. The baby was active, kicking and rolling constantly, and sometimes Vincent would just sit with his hand on her stomach, feeling the movements with wonder on his face. It was a cold December night when the pain started. Tabitha woke from a fitful sleep with a gasp, feeling her belly tighten and release in a way that was different from the practice contractions she had been having for weeks. She reached for Vincent, who came awake immediately. "Is it time?" "I think so." Vincent was up and moving before she finished speaking, pulling on his clothes and boots. "I will get Pete and send him for the midwife. You stay here and try to rest." But resting was impossible. The pains came faster and harder, and Tabitha found herself pacing the room, breathing through each contraction the way Martha had taught her. Vincent returned within minutes, having roused Pete and sent him riding hard for town despite the snow. "How far apart are they?" Vincent asked, and Tabitha could hear the worry in his voice. "Close. Maybe 5 minutes." Vincent paled. Pete said it would take him at least an hour to get to town and back with the midwife, maybe longer in this weather. "Then we do this ourselves," Tabitha said, trying to sound braver than she felt. She had attended a few births back in Kansas City, helping the midwife who lived in her boarding house. She knew the basics. But knowing and doing were very different things, especially when it was your own body. Another contraction hit, this one so strong it drove her to her knees. Vincent caught her, supporting her weight, murmuring words of encouragement. When it passed, he helped her to the bed and went to boil water and gather clean cloths, moving with the efficiency of a man who had helped birth calves and foals, and knew that some processes could not be rushed. The labor was long and difficult. The pains came one on top of another, giving Tabitha no time to rest. She tried to be quiet, tried to be brave, but eventually she could not help but cry out. Vincent never left her side, holding her hand and wiping her face with cool cloths and telling her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. When the urge to push finally came, Tabitha bore down with everything she had, feeling like she was being torn apart. Vincent positioned himself to catch the baby, his face pale but determined. One more push and then another, and then suddenly there was a wailing cry that filled the room. "It is a boy," Vincent said, his voice choked with emotion. "Tabitha, we have a son." He wrapped the baby in a clean cloth and placed him on Tabitha's chest. She looked down at the tiny, red-faced infant and felt a surge of love so intense it was almost painful. The baby had dark hair like hers and was screaming his displeasure at being thrust into the cold world. But he was beautiful, perfect, and he was hers. "Hello, little one," she whispered, and the baby quieted at the sound of her voice, his unfocused eyes trying to find her face. Vincent was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the mother and child. "He is perfect," he said. "He is absolutely perfect." The midwife arrived an hour later, brought by a half-frozen Pete, but by then the worst was over. She checked Tabitha and the baby, pronouncing them both healthy, and showed Vincent how to cut the cord and bathe the infant properly. She stayed the rest of the night, making sure there were no complications. And by morning, Tabitha was sitting up in bed, nursing her son and feeling like she had been through a war. Vincent sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders, watching the baby nurse with an expression of such love and pride that it made Tabitha's heart ache. "What should we name him?" he asked. Tabitha had thought about this. "I was thinking Thomas, after my grandfather. He was the only one in my family who was kind to me." "Thomas Dalton." Vincent tried out the name. "I like it. Thomas Vincent Dalton. You want to give him your name." "He is my son," Vincent said simply. "In every way that matters, he is my son, and I want him to have my name." Fresh tears spilled down Tabitha's cheeks. "You are a good man, Vincent Dalton." "I am a lucky man," Vincent corrected. "I have a beautiful wife and a healthy son and a life I never thought I would get to have." Little Thomas Dalton thrived in the weeks that followed. He was a healthy baby with a good appetite and a surprisingly calm temperament. Tabitha had heard horror stories about infants who cried all night and refused to sleep. But Thomas seemed content as long as he was fed and warm and held. Vincent was a natural father, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with Thomas when he did fuss, singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice until the baby fell asleep. Pete was utterly besotted with the child, constantly finding excuses to peek into the cradle and making ridiculous faces to try to get Thomas to smile. The ranch hands treated the baby like a small miracle, and the neighboring ranchers' wives visited regularly, bringing baby clothes and blankets and advice that Tabitha sometimes followed and sometimes ignored. As winter gave way to spring, Tabitha found herself settling into her new role as wife and mother with a contentment she had never expected. She loved the rhythm of ranch life, the early mornings and the hard work, and the satisfaction of seeing things grow and thrive. She loved watching Vincent with Thomas, the gentle way he held the baby and the stories he told him even though Thomas was too young to understand. She loved the life they were building together, brick by brick, day by day. One warm April evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Thomas slept in his cradle nearby, Vincent took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About how I got so lucky. About how I was just going about my life, not looking for anything, and then you showed up and changed everything." Tabitha laughed softly. "I showed up 6 months pregnant and desperate. That is not exactly a fairy tale." "Maybe not a traditional one," Vincent agreed, "but it is our story. And I would not change a single thing about it. Not even the part where you had to marry a woman carrying another man's child." Vincent turned to look at her, and his eyes were fierce. "Thomas is not another man's child. He is our child. That other man, whoever he was, he does not get to claim Thomas. He gave up that right when he abandoned you. I am Thomas's father, me, and I will be until the day I die and beyond if I have any say in it." "I love you," Tabitha said, the words coming easily now without fear or hesitation. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Good scary or bad scary, good scary. The kind that makes me want to be better, do better, love better." Vincent pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you too, more than I thought I could love anyone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Thomas stirred in his cradle, making the small snuffling sounds that meant he would be waking soon and wanting to nurse. Tabitha felt a surge of contentment so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This was happiness. This was home. This was everything she had been searching for without even knowing it. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under Vincent's hard work and Tabitha's careful management of the books and accounts. They expanded the herd, bought more land, and built a larger barn. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's dark hair and gray eyes and his father's calm temperament. He took his first steps in the ranch house kitchen. His first word was "Papa," much to Vincent's delight, and he showed an early fascination with horses that made Vincent predict he would be a rancher like his father. When Thomas was 2 years old, Tabitha realized she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear or shame, only joy. Vincent was thrilled, already planning to expand the nursery and build another cradle. The pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Tabitha was not carrying the weight of shame and fear along with the baby. Their daughter was born on a beautiful summer day in 1882, with the midwife in attendance and Vincent pacing nervously outside until Tabitha called him in to meet his daughter. They named her Catherine, after Vincent's mother, and she was as different from Thomas as night from day. Where Thomas had been calm and easy, Catherine was fierce and demanding, with a powerful set of lungs and opinions about everything from the start. Vincent adored her, his little firecracker daughter who wrapped him around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Tabitha watched him with the children and fell in love with him all over again, seeing the kind of father he was, patient and loving and steadfast. More children followed over the years. Another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved books as much as his mother. Twin girls, Sarah and Emma, who were inseparable from birth and kept everyone on their toes with their mischievous energy. And finally, another boy, William, who was the baby of the family and spoiled by everyone. The ranch house that had seemed so spacious when it was just Vincent living there was now bursting with life and noise and love. Tabitha taught all the children to read and write, holding school lessons in the parlor every morning. Vincent taught them to ride and rope and care for the animals. Pete, who was now too old for anything but light work, entertained them with stories and terrible jokes. Thomas grew into a fine young man, strong and capable and kind. When he was 16, a visiting rancher made a comment about Thomas not really being Vincent's son, some cruel remark meant to diminish or hurt. Thomas had looked the man in the eye and said, "He is my father in every way that matters. He chose me, he raised me, he loved me." That makes him more of a father than most men who just share blood. Vincent had heard about it later and had to go out to the barn to compose himself, overcome with emotion. That night, he told Thomas that he could not be more proud if Thomas had been born of his own blood. And Thomas, now nearly a man himself, hugged his father and said, "I am proud to be your son." Tabitha watched her children grow, watched her husband gray at the temples and develop the weathered look of a man who had spent his life working in the sun. She saw the lines deepen around his eyes from years of laughter and smiling. She felt her own body change with age and childbearing, saw the silver threads in her own dark hair. But she also saw the life they had built together, against all odds. She saw the ranch that was now one of the most successful in the region. She saw the children who were healthy and happy and loved. She saw the community they had become part of, respected and welcomed, despite the unconventional way their marriage had begun. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent took her on a picnic to the spot where he had first asked her to marry him, leaving the children in Pete's capable if elderly hands. They sat on a blanket and ate cold chicken and fresh bread, and Vincent pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a pendant in the shape of a heart. "I know it is not much," he said, looking almost shy, "but I saw it in Cheyenne last month and thought of you." Tabitha held the necklace up, watching it catch the light. "It is perfect." "But you did not have to get me anything." "I wanted to. I want you to know that I still think about you, still want to make you happy." "You do make me happy," Tabitha said, reaching for his hand. "Every single day." Even when the twins put frogs in Sarah's bed and William tracked mud through the house and Thomas came home with that black eye from defending Catherine's honor, Tabitha laughed. "Even then, especially then, because all of that chaos and noise and mess is the life we built together. It is our family, and I would not trade it for anything." Vincent fastened the necklace around her neck and then kissed her, long and sweet. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been if I had not been at the hotel that day or if I had not followed you inside?" "Sometimes," Tabitha admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. I would rather think about all the good that has come from that chance meeting. You saved me, Vincent. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved me right back," Vincent said. "I was just existing before you came along. You taught me how to really live." They sat together as the sun set, just like they had so many times before, and Tabitha thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived in Douglas. That frightened, pregnant, desperate girl who thought her life was over. If she could go back and tell that girl what the future held, she never would have believed it. She never would have believed that shame and failure could transform into love and family and belonging. But life had a way of surprising you. Vincent had surprised her by seeing past her circumstances to the person she was inside. He had surprised her by choosing her and her child when he could have chosen an easier path. He had surprised her every day since with his steadfast love and his gentle strength and his unwavering commitment to their family. And she hoped she had surprised him too. Hoped that she had brought as much joy to his life as he had brought to hers. Hoped that the love she gave him was equal to the love he had given her. As the years continued to pass, the Dalton Ranch became a landmark in the region. Thomas took over much of the day-to-day running of the operation as Vincent's back started to give him trouble. Catherine married a young lawyer from Cheyenne and gave them their first grandchild. James went to college in Denver, much to Tabitha's pride, and came back with a teaching certificate, taking over the Douglas schoolhouse where his mother had once been rejected. The twins married brothers from a neighboring ranch and stayed close, building houses on adjacent properties. William, the baby, decided he wanted to be a veterinarian and went off to study in the East. Tabitha and Vincent grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played. They held hands and talked about everything and nothing. They remembered. Pete passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 89, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had loved. At the funeral, Vincent spoke about loyalty and friendship, and how family was not always about blood. Tabitha thought about how true that was, how Pete had been part of their family just as surely as any of their children. When Tabitha was 55 years old, she received a letter that shook her to her core. It was from a lawyer in Kansas City, informing her that the man who had fathered Thomas had died in a saloon fight, and that in his effects they had found an old photograph of Tabitha, and a letter she had written him years ago, before everything fell apart. The lawyer wanted to know if she was the Tabitha Carson mentioned in the letter. Tabitha sat at the kitchen table, holding the letter with shaking hands. Vincent found her there and read the letter over her shoulder. Then he took it from her hands and tossed it into the stove, watching it burn. "That part of your life is over," he said gently. "It has been over for more than 30 years. That man does not get to intrude on our happiness, not even from the grave." "I should feel something," Tabitha said. "Anger or grief or something, but I just feel nothing, like he is a stranger." "He is a stranger. He has been a stranger since the day he left you. Thomas's father is sitting right here, and he has been here for every moment that mattered." Tabitha looked at her husband, her partner, the love of her life, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked her over. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Vincent said. "We found each other when we needed each other most, and we built something beautiful together." On a crisp autumn day in 1904, when Tabitha was 67 and Vincent was 75, they sat on their porch watching the sunset like they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was quieter now, with most of the children grown and gone, though they visited often with the grandchildren. Thomas was running the ranch with his own sons. The house still stood strong, though it had been added onto and renovated over the years. Vincent reached for Tabitha's hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I have been thinking about that first day we met. You were so scared but trying so hard to be brave, and I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change. I thought you were going to be like all the rest," Tabitha admitted. "Another man looking to take advantage, but you were different. You saw me as a person, not just a problem to be solved or an opportunity to be exploited. You were never a problem. You were a gift. You and Thomas both. Thomas turned 50 last month. Can you believe it? Our little boy is 50 years old with grandchildren of his own." "Time moves fast," Vincent said. "Feels like just yesterday I was teaching him to ride his first horse." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tabitha thought about all the sunsets they had watched together, all the seasons they had weathered, all the joys and sorrows they had shared. It had been a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and purpose. "You have any regrets?" Vincent asked suddenly. Tabitha considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain I caused my family, even though they caused me pain too. I regret not standing up for myself more when I was younger. I regret that I did not meet you sooner." She paused. "But I do not regret the path that led me to you. Even the hard parts, even the shameful parts, because they brought me here. What about you? I regret the years I wasted being alone before you came along. I regret not telling you I loved you sooner. I regret every moment I was not with you." Vincent squeezed her hand. "But like you said, I do not regret the path, because it led me to you and our family." They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the world in shades of twilight. Inside the house, they could hear Catherine and her husband arriving for dinner, their voices calling out in greeting. Soon the house would be full of noise and laughter, and the chaos of family. But for now, it was just the two of them, sitting hand in hand, watching another day end and feeling grateful for every single one they had been given together. The winter of 1907 was particularly harsh, and Vincent caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts and Tabitha's devoted nursing, he grew weaker. The children all came home, filling the house with worried faces and whispered conversations. But Vincent remained calm, at peace with what was coming on his last day, with Tabitha sitting beside him holding his hand and all their children gathered around. Vincent looked at each of them in turn. "I am proud of all of you," he said, his voice weak but clear. "You have grown into fine people, and you have given your mother and me more joy than we ever thought possible." Then he turned to Tabitha, and his eyes were full of love. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for trusting me with your heart and your son and your life. You made me happier than I ever thought I could be." "I love you," Tabitha whispered, tears streaming down her face. I have loved you from the moment you defended me in that hotel. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I know," Vincent said, smiling, "and I love you too. Take care of our family. Tell Thomas that he is my son always. Tell all of them that I am proud. Tell them I love them." "I will." Vincent closed his eyes, and with his hand in Tabitha's and his children surrounding him, he slipped away peacefully. Tabitha sat with him for a long time, holding his hand even after it grew cold, unable to let go of the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything for nearly 30 years. They buried Vincent on the hill next to Pete, with a view of the ranch he had built and the land he had loved. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Wyoming, all the people whose lives Vincent had touched with his quiet kindness and steady strength. Tabitha stood dry-eyed through it all, supported by her children, knowing that Vincent would not want her to fall apart. After the funeral, Thomas took his mother's hands. "He told me once years ago about the day you arrived in Douglas. He said it was the luckiest day of his life." "He told me the same thing," Tabitha said. "Many times. Mother, I want you to know something. I have always known that Vincent Dalton was not my biological father, and I have never cared. He was my father in every way that mattered. He chose me before I was even born. He loved me without reservation. He raised me to be the man I am today, and I am proud to carry his name." Tabitha pulled her son into a hug, finally letting the tears fall. "He was so proud of you, he loved you so much." "I know, and I loved him too, I still do." Tabitha lived another 8 years, spending her time between the ranch and her children's homes. She watched her grandchildren grow, and her great-grandchildren be born. She wrote down the story of her life with Vincent, wanting future generations to know about the man who had shown her that love could heal, that kindness could transform, that choosing someone could be as powerful as any blood tie. On a warm summer evening in 1915, Tabitha sat on the porch of the ranch house, now run by Thomas's son but still home. She was 82 years old, her hair completely white, her hands gnarled with age, but her mind was clear and her heart was full. As the sun set, painting the sky in familiar colors, she closed her eyes and let her mind drift back through the years. She remembered being 22 and terrified, stepping off that stagecoach with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She remembered Vincent's kind eyes and strong hands. She remembered the way he had looked at her when he asked her to marry him, like she was precious instead of ruined. She remembered the birth of Thomas and Catherine and all the others. She remembered laughter and tears, hardship and joy, all the moments that made up a life well lived. She felt a warmth beside her, and when she opened her eyes, she could almost see Vincent sitting there, young and strong and smiling at her the way he used to. She reached out her hand, and she could almost feel his fingers intertwine with hers. "I am coming," she whispered. "Wait for me just a little longer." But she did not need to wait. Her heart, which had been broken and healed and filled to bursting with love over the course of her long life, simply stopped beating. And those who found her said that she looked peaceful, happy even, with a smile on her face and her hand outstretched as if reaching for someone only she could see. They buried Tabitha next to Vincent, and on her headstone they carved the words she had requested. She showed up 6 months pregnant. The cowboy said that baby will know a father's love, and together they built a life that proved love chooses us as much as we choose it. Thomas stood at his mother's grave with his own children and grandchildren around him, and he told them the story. About a young woman alone and afraid, and a cowboy who saw past circumstance to character. About a promise made and kept, about a family built on choice and love instead of obligation and blood. About 2 people who found each other when they needed each other most, and created something beautiful together. The Dalton Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Thomas's line. And always, the story of Vincent and Tabitha was told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the best love stories start in the most unexpected ways. That shame can be transformed into honor, that fear can become courage, and that the family we choose can be just as powerful as the family we are born into. In Douglas, Wyoming, where their story began, their names became legend. The schoolhouse where James Dalton taught was eventually named in honor of his parents. The library that was built years later bore a plaque dedicating it to Tabitha Dalton, who had fought for education and literacy in the community. And the ranchers in the area still spoke of Vincent Dalton as a man who embodied the best of what the West could be. Strong but gentle, hardworking but kind, a man who stood by his word and his family no matter what. Their descendants continued to live in Wyoming, spreading across the state and beyond, carrying with them the values that Vincent and Tabitha had instilled. They taught their children about choice and love, about seeing past surfaces to what really mattered. They told the story of a pregnant woman and a cowboy, and a promise that changed everything. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Wyoming plains painting the sky in gold and pink, you could almost feel their presence still there, sitting on the porch of that ranch house, hand in hand, watching another beautiful day come to its end, together in love as they had been in life, a testament to the power of choosing love even when the world says you should not, even when the circumstances are not ideal, even when it would be easier to walk away. Their love story, which began with fear and desperation, ended with peace and fulfillment. It was not a fairy tale, not in the traditional sense. There was no prince or castle, no magic or destiny. There was only a man and a woman who saw each other truly, who chose each other freely, and who built a life together that was rich with meaning and love. They proved that family is made not just by blood, but by promise, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest courage is simply saying yes when someone offers you hope. In the end, that is what Vincent gave Tabitha that day in the hotel and every day after. Hope. Hope that her life was not over. Hope that she could be loved despite her mistakes. Hope that her child would have a father who chose him. And Tabitha gave Vincent hope too. Hope that his lonely life could be full. Hope that his damaged heart could love again. Hope that the future could be bright. Together, they transformed hope into reality, building a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lives. They proved that love, real love, is not about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It is about showing up, day after day, choosing each other over and over again. It is about seeing someone at their worst and loving them anyway. It is about making promises and keeping them, about building something together that is stronger than either person could create alone. The story of Tabitha Carson and Vincent Dalton became more than just their own story. It became a symbol of what was possible in the wild, untamed West, where people could reinvent themselves, where second chances were real, and where love could conquer even the harshest circumstances. It reminded people that everyone has a story, that judgment is often misplaced, and that the truest measure of a person is not where they start but how they finish. And they finished well, those two. They finished with a house full of love, a ranch full of life, and hearts full of gratitude for the day that chance or fate or providence brought them together in a dusty Wyoming town. They finished knowing that they had loved well and been loved in return, that they had kept their promises to each other and to the child who brought them together. They finished with no regrets, only gratitude for every moment they had been given. Their legacy lived on in the generations that followed, in the stories that were told, in the values that were passed down. And somewhere in the wide Wyoming sky, you could imagine them still together, watching over the land and the family they had created, still in love after all these years, still grateful for that day when a scared pregnant woman stepped off a stagecoach and a lonely cowboy decided to help her, never knowing that simple act of kindness would transform both their lives forever. That was their story, the story of she showed up 6 months pregnant, and the cowboy said that baby will know a father's love. And it was a story that proved, beyond any doubt, that love always finds a way.